live in a town in the UK, not too far out from the West Midlands. I recently moved to a new home with my husband and son. We had moved into a new house as my son is now 18 and we needed a bigger place with more space for us all. The house we moved into was previously occupied, but we never saw or met the previous owners as they had already left and this was done through agencies. It was set on a quiet road. The houses on our road were detached. We'd been settled in and living in the house for about a week when one evening, strange things started to occur. We have a dog, Odin, who is a beautiful German Shepherd. He's a great, loving, playful dog, but is also very switched on and likes to protect his owners, as any good guard dog would. One evening, a week or so after we'd moved in, my husband and I were sitting in our living room when Odin wandered into the hallway. They say dogs has a sense of things that humans are unaware of, so it was a surprise to me and unsettled me when I heard Odin growling at the bottom of the stairs as he looked up to the top of them. I called him to stop, but he didn't take his eyes from the top of the stairs, and he stood there, continuing to growl. My son wasn't home, so I knew no one was upstairs, so it began to concern me. I asked my husband to check what he was looking at. The light was off upstairs, so when my husband turned them on and lit up the landing, there was nothing or no one there at the top of the stairs. He went up and the dog followed, and they found nothing. And with that, we just forgot about it, thinking the dog was acting weird or whatever. It wasn't until a few days later, in the daytime this time, where we had family around. My sister and her son, who was 5 at the time, had come to visit and check out our new house. Myself, my husband, and son were all sitting in the living room with them when my nephew was in the hallway playing with his toy when we began to hear him cry. Upon looking out into the hallway to see if he was okay, he was standing at the bottom of the stairs, looking up at the top. We asked him what the matter was, why he was crying, and what he did next sent a shiver down my spine. He pointed up to the top of the stairs and said, "The man up the stairs." We all looked at him confused and shocked, but I remembered the dog growling up there the other night and it really freaked me out. My husband and son looked up the stairs and investigated. They looked everywhere upstairs, even in the loft, and they found nothing. As you know, they say kids have overactive imaginations, but to me, this wasn't it. I didn't feel like that at all. Later that same night, I heard my son scream from his room. Scared, I ran to his room and knocked to see if he was okay. He answered and said it was nothing and that everything was fine, but you don't scream for no reason. So I managed to get it out of him. He said he was lying there, drifting off to sleep when his radio turned on its own, and static blared out. Startled by this, it was then he felt something touch his shoulder, and that is why he had screamed. To me, this was becoming far too creepy, with all the strange occurrences happening in the past week, but my husband always played it off and had some explanation for everything. I honestly didn't feel comfortable in my own home and began to get bad vibes. It was what happened next that pushed me over the edge. One night, when myself and my husband were lying in bed, I felt a shiver run through me. I couldn't sleep. I kept waking up at this exact moment. I couldn't help but get the feeling that I was being watched. I rolled over and looked around the room feeling anxious and uneasy. The room was dark as I looked around and I couldn't make anything out. That was until my eyes fell upon the open bedroom door, when I froze in fear, motionless, unable to move, as I swore a shadow of a person lay in the bedroom door. But as quick as I saw it, the bedroom door suddenly slammed shut. I screamed, waking my husband instantly. The dog downstairs began to bark. I told him what I saw, and he checked everywhere. The dog came running upstairs and began growling at a certain point of the hallway like there was a presence there. I knew that there wasn't an intruder in the house, but it was something else. I couldn't sleep that night, and for that matter, any night since. We're still in the house currently, but we're looking for somewhere else to move as fast as possible. This doesn't feel like a home, and the energy here is strange. Some people might not believe in this kind of stuff. the paranormal or ghosts or whatever. But I can't really explain how it makes you feel. If people have experienced this, they'll know how much it scares you. You know, people might not find this scary, but I thought I'd share my story here with you. And I hope I won't have another story like this to tell again. So hopefully we'll be out of this house very soon, as I know we are not alone here. I have never had an experience like this before, and it's truly the reason I believe in the paranormal and that certain places can be haunted. I've never been one to suffer from sleep paralysis, and this is what terrified me. This happened to me just over a year ago and still haunts me to this day. I'd recently rented a new house after moving for work purposes. I believed I had found a great deal, as the rent was cheap and the house itself was spacious, old, but still spacious, and ready to move into with it being vacant for so long, having no occupants since the previous owners had left. I had begun the process of moving my things and had a friend helping me out. I would be living alone as I was currently single and concentrating on my career. I hadn't moved far, so I was still local to my family and friends. After a long day of moving and getting settled, I was exhausted and decided to have an early night. On my first night sleeping in the new house, I remember struggling to sleep. I would keep waking up suddenly and waking up to the coldness of the room. The windows in the room were closed, and it was the middle of summer, so I don't understand how the room could be so cold. After waking up numerous times and trying to get warm, I managed to drift off, but again, at around 2:30 a.m., I woke again suddenly, but this time it was different. I felt awake, but I couldn't move. I was laying there, but I couldn't sit up. It was like my brain was awake, but my body was still asleep. And let me tell you, it was one horrible feeling. I would never like to experience that again. Not being able to move, but feeling awake, I didn't know if I was dreaming or not. It was then, as I tried to move, I began to hear what sounded like footsteps in the room by the side of my bed. I began to panic. I couldn't move as much as I tried. It was like somebody was pinning me down, and it sounded like somebody was in the room. My heart began to race, and I could literally feel the tears in my eyes. After I'd say a good minute of this, the sound of footsteps stopped, and I suddenly had control back over myself, and I was able to fully wake up and sit up. I was breathing so heavily from panic as I looked around the room, but no one was there. Everything was as it was. I jumped out of bed and opened the bedroom door, looking out into the hallway and checking the doors. The house was empty. The doors were locked. I knew I was exhausted, and I couldn't help but think maybe I was just imagining it all, that maybe my brain was just overreacting, causing me to experience that sleep paralysis. And seems I'd never had that before, I began to convince myself I was hearing things and dreaming it. Safe to say, I struggled to sleep the rest of that night. The following few days was, again, more of getting myself settled in, and on the following evenings, I didn't seem to have that horrible experience as I did the first night, and I slept straight through. Albeit, my friend had slept over this time. But as it approached my 5th night, and I was again home alone, I was getting myself ready for bed when I had this anxious feeling come over me. It was strange. I don't really know how to explain it. It was as if my mood had just dropped, and I didn't know why. As I jumped into bed that evening, it took me a while to fall asleep, but I finally drifted off at some point after countless turns trying to get comfortable. Later that night, I again woke abruptly to the cold temperature of the room. As I went to move or sit up, I was again met with the horrible feeling of not being able to move. I was awake, aware of what was going on, but couldn't move. That feeling is so terrifying. Realizing this, panic set in quick, and I started to try to force myself to move. I couldn't. It was like I was being pinned down. It was at that moment I could hear what again sounded like slow footsteps entering the room. They got closer and closer to my bed, and I couldn't turn to see. They stopped and silence fell. My heart racing. I could feel myself screaming inside. It was then the sound of creaking could be heard right next to my bed, like the sound of a rocking chair, moving backwards and forwards. I was completely terrified at this point, hearing these sounds and not being able to see what it was. The sound of the rocking chair suddenly came to a halt, and the room was silent. The sound of footsteps slowly began to move around the side of my bed again, as if they were circling me. As they reached the other side of the bed, they again stopped. I lay there, motionless in silence, trying to move, panic taking over me. I mean, why couldn't I move? Who was in my room? Was I in a dreamlike state? It's all I could think of. Then the worst thing imaginable happened. The side of my bed began to lower, as if someone had just sat on the edge of my bed. My heart beating out of my chest, feeling the tears rolling down my face, fighting to gain control. The silence of the room broke with the haunting screams of a man right next to my head. As the scream pierced through me, I suddenly shot up, gained control of myself, screaming out loud myself, holding my body as I began to shake. I couldn't catch my breath. I looked around the room and could see no one. I thought to myself, was I dreaming this fucked up situation? It wasn't until I heard it that I soon realized that I wasn't. The sound of the rocking chair. As I looked in the corner of the room, I saw it. A chair rocking backwards and forwards on its own. A chair that was located in the basement and had been left by previous owners. How did that even get into my room? Knowing it was insane and crazy to think, but I knew what I saw, and there was no explaining it. I ran out of that room and called my friend to come and pick me up. After that night and the terrifying feelings I encountered being alone and unable to move while waking up in bed, I never wanted to feel that ever again, and I never slept in that house again. I stayed with family and friends until I had found a new place to live. I don't know who or what it was that gave me those traumatic experiences, but I do know there was a paranormal presence in that house. I don't know what happened or why it did what it did, but ever since then, I have a different outlook on life, knowing that these things are real. The feeling of not being in control of your own body and the feeling of sleep paralysis is a feeling I can't describe. It's just horrible. Whatever the presence was in that house, I hope to never feel or experience it again. Just a quick one, guys. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed these disturbing stories. Why don't you comment down below which one would have terrified you the most if it were you in that situation. Also, don't forget to subscribe just over to the left and look out for plenty more upcoming content by hitting that bell button. If you can, like, comment, and share. It really helps us out, and I really appreciate it a lot, you guys. Let us know what story subjects you'd be interested in hearing soon in upcoming videos. And thanks again. Take care out there, and remember, fear lies within.